Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beneath Behaviour podcast. Today's episode is actually going to resonate with every single parent under the planet because I always say that parenting changes us physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, and ethically. That every single thing that we thought we were, the feelings that we feel, it all changes once we have kids. And when we have this idea of having children, we create this idea of what it will look like when we had absolutely no clue what it was going to look like. And often with all of those changes comes a lot of kind of emotions for some parents where we're really having to challenge our belief systems and even challenge the beliefs that were set up when we were when we were being raised and our own childhood. So I have with me today Mum Amanda, who is navigating the teenage years with her 14-year-old daughter, who has also recently been diagnosed with autism and PDA. I'm Jackie Hall, and this is Beneath Behaviour, where we break down stress, reactions, and get to the heart of why we all do the things we do. We'll have real conversations, find real solutions, and have absolutely no judgment. Welcome to the show, Amanda. Thanks for coming here.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit about what the journey of parenting has been like for you, receiving that diagnosis and some of the things that you've been experiencing mentally, emotionally, or, you know, how you've dealt with the challenges and the changes that have happened in your world.
That's a very big question. It's been completely, it's just transformed everything about who I am as a person, really, becoming a parent. I guess in more recent years, it's been really intense with, some of the behaviours that, my daughter's been experiencing and as a result, we've all been experiencing. I think she's always been an anxious child, and perhaps we just always assumed that that's what it was, and so we're kind of just looking at that as being a bit of anxiety, and sometimes that would mean we couldn't leave the house, or we weren't getting to things as we'd planned, and that sort of came and went a little bit depending on what was going on. But in the last sort of couple of years, it's really escalated, and it started to question everything about whether it was the way that, I was parenting her, and had I enabled sort of these sort of behaviours, or had I created this, because there was no one else in my friend group who understood what I was going through. So I suppose finding a community of people who are going through this is new to me, but it's also been extremely helpful.
Yeah, and it's, I hear this a lot from the autistic community as parents are feeling so isolated and feeling so unseen and misunderstood, and their children are misunderstood. And I think hopefully that awareness is starting to become more frequent, that people are becoming more aware. But I think, sometimes if you're not in that world, you just don't understand. And even the best intentioned people can often say the wrong things or just don't get it. And it's amazing how many parents I've spoken to that instantly jump into, well, if my child's behavior is a certain way, it must be what I'm doing wrong. And then from that becomes all of these emotions of guilt and shame and even feeling triggered when things aren't going to plan. What are some of the, like we talk about in this podcast, some of the narratives that go on in our own heads that trigger how we feel and how we respond to some of those challenges? What's some of the things that go on in your mind about your daughter's behavior?
Yeah, it's so challenging because, the culture is telling us that, children should be compliant, and there's sort of this stick and carrot kind of reward and punishment sort of setup. And that's how I was brought up. And I guess that's how I assumed everything worked.
Mhm.
And it's just not how things work for us. And so I was having to kind of change those behaviors just by experiment, really, but then taking my husband along for that journey as well, because he, would say, well, there needs to be consequences for this behavior, or, if
Yeah.
she's not going to go to school, then she's not going to be able to have access to her iPad, or, whatever these kind of set up, make up the rules as we go along. But, none of it was working. And so it's just this sense of failure as a parent, like I'm just not doing it right, and I'm
Mm.
letting everyone down, and everyone else's kids are thriving and mine's not. It's just such a sense of shame and failure about, I'm a smart person,
Mhm.
why
Yeah.
can't I figure this out? And why are
Yeah.
we all struggling so much? Why are we all so miserable,
Mhm.
because we just don't seem to be figuring out the basics about how to get through a day.
Yeah. And I totally get it. Like the whole reason why the Parental Stress Center exists. If anyone's new to this podcast, you can watch the first episode where I talk about my breakdown to get my breakthrough, where I completely fell apart, throwing things across the room in anger and slamming a knife on the bench so hard it almost hit my then 2-year-old, and running to the bedroom screaming how much I hated my life, or with my 6-month-old on my hip, and just completely devastated at the parent that I had become, and just going, this is not who I want to be, this is not how I want to parent. And when things aren't going the way that we want them to go, very often we go into this deep narrative about, like you said, shame and guilt, and I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, and these kids are just, they're struggling because of me. And it's because we have kind of had this indoctrination that says life has to be going on this straight pathway in order for us to, feel good or feel good enough or feel like we're doing a good enough job. And there's no grace for us to be experiencing the highs and lows. Have you sort of found that within yourself, like that narrative of, I'm not enough, there's a right path and I should be on it and I should know how to get on it. And if not, then my child's missing out and I'm missing out and it's all my fault?
100%. And I think what's made that even more juicy is that I already had that within me, so
Mm-hmm.
it's already an unwritten rule that I put on myself and
Yeah.
have my whole life around. You have to do things a certain way, you always have to, be the best at everything, so this kind of perfectionism running in the background. And then you have this child that doesn't do that, and you
Yeah.
have no control over that, and it's like trying harder doesn't help.
Yeah.
That's always just been my strategy, just push harder, try harder. um, you know
Yeah.
and I think our culture really sort of celebrates that as well, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like the exact opposite of that is what I was having to learn to do.
Yeah.
And no one tells you that, no one's sort of got, there was no role model, I guess, for me to say, how do I do this differently?
Yeah.
And it still crops up for me when, I want my daughter to, achieve something, or finish an assignment, or, I just want her to do it. And I noticed that inner narrative in me going, it's what I want,
Yeah.
and I forget to tune into what she needs. And
Yeah.
it's a habit that I catch myself in all the time.
Yeah. And it's such a, it's an interesting one, that perfectionist identity, that usually what happens with that perfectionist identity is that somewhere in our childhood, we learned that if I'm perfect or if I get things right, then I either receive great accolades or, and that makes me feel good. And therefore I want to just keep doing things that are great. But more often than not, it happens because I needed to get something whenever I was doing it right, or by doing it right, I was able to avoid something unwanted. So it can go either way, that there was either some reward for getting it right, or there was some avoidance of pain for getting it wrong. And so we learned that all I have to, and it's kind of like on par with the anxiety mindset. So the anxiety mindset, if we look at those 4 stressful thinking lenses that, if you're new to the podcast, we do talk about in episode 2 and 3, actually, that right versus wrong path, missing out, could have, should have, worth less, that life has to be on the right path. If it's not on the right path, I'm missing out. And if I'm missing out and on the right path, then it's somebody's fault, and it's often my fault or maybe somebody else's fault. So I go into that blame mode, and all 3 of those spiral down into the core belief of, what does this mean? And what does this mean about me? It must mean that me or my life is worth less. So with the anxiety mindset, lens 1 and 3, right versus wrong and could have, should have, is usually the most dominant. And it's the belief that I should be able to do more, be more, have more, learn more, control more in order to get my life right, in order to avoid missing out and feeling worth less. And so all 4 of those lenses are all there, but 1 and 3 are the most dominant. So you start to learn, and your experiences in life and the evidence in your life suggests that all I need to do is find another solution, or try harder, or do more, and then I'll get life right. And that's been your approach. So you often then project that onto your child and go, well, this is what I would do, so you should do that too. And what often happens in our parenting, and this is a great thing, although it doesn't feel like it at the time, is that our kids will trigger things in us that often need work, right? And so what you're finding now, by the sounds of it, is that perfectionist mindset, and that need to not just have her do more, be more, have more, learn more, control more to get it right, but that if she's not doing that, then your perfectionist kicks in and goes, well, I should be doing more. And why aren't you doing more? And then kind of goes into that guilt and shame, because just on another note, guilt and shame are 2 different things. So guilt is, I should have behaved differently, or I behaved in a bad way. Shame is, I am bad because of how I've acted. So one is just about the act that I regret doing and I feel bad for doing it. But shame is where we're really personalizing it, saying, well, I am bad from doing that. Like, so where does that kind of guilt and shame come in for you?
I think I sit pretty deeply in that, well, have been for the past sort of 18 months in that shame soup, because it's sort of like, none of this would happen if, there's a lot of black and white thinking that I've noticed in myself about, if I just did this, or if I just, then I kind of have watched myself go the other way. If I just make all of her discomfort go away, it will get better.
Yeah.
So I've flipped to the other side of running around and trying to provide every need that she could possibly, I call myself like a rodeo clown, just running around going, yes, here, I'll do this, I'll warm your socks up, I'll heat your soup up, I'll do everything. And while some of that is necessary, I've watched myself burn out on trying to just go too far the other way.
Yeah.
I don't want her to experience this pain and discomfort because it's too painful for me.
Yeah.
And again, that's just trying too hard. It's like, it's just, I'm having to learn to sit in the discomfort of not knowing what to do all the time, not knowing what she needs, watching her struggle. I'm learning very slowly to try and get better at that, but it's taking a lot of self-reflection, because that, just exactly to your point about the triggers, and it's so ironic because she is so opposite to me in so many ways, and it's like, how is this my child? She's so different, but it's like completely pressing the button that needs to be pressed for me to look at and go,
Yeah. And so how are you doing that? What What sort of tools, like if there are other parents out there that are going, yeah, I need to challenge myself as well, I need to sit in that uncomfortableness and self-reflection, what tools are you using? How are you doing that? How are you challenging yourself?
um, Sometimes it's after the fact. So this morning we had a beautiful case study. I said, on my way home from dropping my daughter at school, I said, oh, that's great timing for the podcast today, because she had an absolute ripper this morning about a pair of socks and couldn't find the right socks. And we have 400 pairs of socks, but yet we couldn't find the right ones. And it was a lot. There was things being thrown around and screaming, and we don't have that every day, but I didn't handle it well. I just, because we'd had a couple of good days, you relax into everything's going well, this is how it's going to be now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm reminded that this is still here. And so I didn't handle it well, and then on the way home I screamed in the car. Like, I let out. This car seems to be my bubble where I can scream. I actually teach mindfulness, so um, I do use a lot of the sort of physical regulating tools. So screaming, shaking my body, punching pillows, getting out in nature. Like, I tend to use those tools as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's after the fact,
Yeah.
sadly. It's like,
Yeah.
I stuffed up, but can I kind of just let that run through my body? Can I let the adrenaline and the cortisol sort of shift and come back into balance? But, I try and do that when I can feel something coming for both of us.
Yeah.
But I don't always get it in time.
Yeah. And look, you're definitely not alone. It is one of the hardest things to watch your child be angry and to express that anger in such morally inappropriate ways, in terms of what we've been taught is morally inappropriate. And also, it triggers often in us this feeling of, I'm out of control. I don't know how to control this. I don't know how to stop them, and I should know how to stop them. And so it triggers a narrative within us, for starters. So, to be fair, that is a tough situation that a lot of parents would struggle with, most parents would struggle with. And it's so great that you have those mindfulness tools to work on the body and to help regulate yourself, preferably before, like you said, you try to do it beforehand. But what often happens is that narrative gets in the way first. And it's so powerful and has so much momentum and so much history that it overrides our conscious ability to activate those bodily strategies in that moment. And it's really great that you can use those after those moments, because it actually shortens the amount of time that you'll stay in it, which means if we stay in it and we repetitively think the same, feel the same, behave the same, and we don't regulate and we don't reset, what often happens is it starts to become a habit that we think, feel, and behave this way. And after a while, it goes from being like just a mood. I'm just feeling dysregulated for a few hours or a few days. Then it starts to become a temperament that now it's like, weeks and months. And then it just starts to become part of your personality trait, that this is who I am. I am angry. I am depressed. I am anxious. I am, similar to how you created the perfectionist identity in the first place. It was just repetition of consistency, saying I should be able to do more, be more, have more, learn more, control more, and then I'll get my life right. So I just have to try harder and do more, and then I'll get there. And so you keep doing that over and over again, and it starts to become a habit. And like with all these thoughts, what happens is that your cells, and like every time you have a thought, you release chemicals into the body, and your body cells in your body literally adapt themselves to receiving those chemicals. So it starts to become normal that I have these emotional reactions. So regulating those emotions helps to reset. And when we're trying to change our responses to things, we really have to do it in two ways. We have to do it from a top down and a bottom up approach. And it sounds like, and you're actually the opposite to most people, is that they're usually trying to change their mindset, which you're also doing, but their dominant skill is to go, how can I change how I'm thinking in order to change how I'm feeling? And you've got the tools to do the opposite, that your default is to go, how can I change how I'm feeling to change how I'm thinking? And that's helpful, but you also have to get to the narrative that's triggered the emotion in the first place. And that might be what the focus needs to be for you to be able to prevent the feeling in the first place. And being aware of, what must I be thinking to be feeling triggered right now? Because that narrative will be saying something about something that's in conflict with the reality of what's happening right now. So if we were to use this, is it okay to use this morning's exam as an
Yeah.
example? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you reflect back on it, and just keeping in mind, this is not about perfection, and this is not always easy, and we do get lulled into a false sense of security. So our kids will be great for a couple of days and we'll think, yes, I am nailing life. I've got it right. Okay, I'm doing the perfect thing. I'm ticking the boxes, so it must stay like this forever. And then they catch us off guard, and then those beliefs come back up again. So often what we're doing is reflecting in hindsight, and we've got to be saying, okay, as when you've regulated your emotions, you're back to baseline, you're using all those wonderful tools that you have to be able to kind of tell your nervous system, we're okay, let's reset. Then you want to say, all right, let's reflect. What must I have been thinking to be feeling this way? What was going on, do you think, in hindsight, when you look back on your narrative, observing her behavior? At what point do you think you started to get triggered? Was there a buildup of the narrative, or was there just an explosion? Because some people can go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond, and some people actually start to stack it up. So, for example, you might be, just doing the dishes and you're thinking, all right, I just want 5 minutes of peace. I'm doing the dishes, then children are occupied, and then one of your children comes in after like 30 seconds and says, I want this. And it's just like, oh my gosh, why do you need me right now? And then you start with that narrative, and then the brain will start to find evidence of what you've got your attention on, which is wrong path, missing out, could have, should have, worth less, and look for evidence of what you have your attention on. So then it becomes, why do you need me right now? Why does everybody always need me? Why don't I ever have any time to myself? Why is it that I can't just do this one thing that I want to do? Because do you think I want to be spending my 30 seconds of time to myself doing the dishes? But no, nobody else is going to do the dishes, are they? Because nobody does anything around here because it's always on me. And I have to do this, and I have to go to work, and I have to earn money, and I have to do X, Y, and Z. And no one's doing that for me, are they? But you want me to do that for you. And we just start stacking it up and rolling in the mud, right? Until we get to a point where we just kind of explode. And I think most people can relate to that stack until you crack. But then other people can relate to, I was fine, and then they did this, and all of a sudden I just exploded. So which one of it was it for you?
Oh, well, I'm very familiar with both of those versions. Sometimes
it's literally why the Parental Stress Center exists. So not speaking from a pedestal of perfection by any means.
Particularly this morning, what I notice is that my daughter responds to my nervous system. So I was a bit short this morning because I had a lot on my mind, and so my tone of voice I could tell that she was reacting to my tone of voice. She was asking me, what's the time? And there are a million places to see the time for herself this morning, but she's yelling at me from the other side of the house, what's the time? And so I was like, oh, I don't, I was a bit snippy with my answer. And then I reckon, that just cranks up a little bit. And then she asked me something else, and I was a bit short, and I can feel her sort of tightening because she's responding to, oh, mum's unhappy, that makes me stressed.
Yeah.
And then when she was looking for the socks, the narrative on reflection was, well, if you'd put your bloody clothes away that have been in your room for 3 months, then we wouldn't have, et cetera, et cetera. So I was frustrated because this is, it's something that comes up all the time, but we haven't we're still trying to find the socks.
Yeah.
It was like we should have had this sorted out by now. We
Yeah.
still shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to not appear really annoyed, and I'm trying to be gentle, and it's like, it's okay. Well, we'll all just like look together for your socks and it's all fine,
Yeah. Like she's
But
feeling the energy, right?
I'm
So
correct. Yeah. I'm
you might be
seething.
hearing the words, but she's feeling the real thing that's going on.
So I'm using a lot of energy just trying to, make everything okay.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I actually don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like I just don't know. I'm just hoping it all just goes away.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is that in that perfectionist mindset, you should always be on the right path. That's what the perfectionist says, that I need to control this situation to be going right. And sometimes the reality, because remember, all stress is a conflict between belief and reality. So the belief is everything should be going right. I should be able to get it to go right. And if it's not going right, there's something going wrong and I need to find an answer for it. And that's why it's sort of like even an anxiety element, is because you're desperately searching for the right answer or the right tool or the thing that's going to control the situation to get back to being right, because right is your safety net.
Yeah.
If it's right, I'm okay. If it's not right, I'm not. And that's where you're needing to challenge that mindset and regulate the body at the same time when things aren't going to plan, to be able to surrender and go, I don't have the answer and I'm still okay. Because you'll have, like, there's a reason why you set up that perfectionist identity in the first place. And at the time it made sense. And you don't have to on this you can if you want, but you don't have to on this podcast go into the details of that. And you don't need to, in the respect that it's irrelevant how we got to the story, but we got to that belief that only when I can be perfect and get life right can I feel good or good enough or feel safe and feel like I'm comfortable. And so anything that starts to deviate off your perceived right path starts to install a little bit of panic, because you'll be operating through an old self. Now, I brought along a little friend of mine because I knew this would be a relevant conversation. This is my little kangaroo that has a little Joey in it, right? So this is often a really good kind of visual to help people to kind of understand what we're often dealing with as adults. So we have adult self and we have child self. Now, child self, for whatever reason, learned through childhood that the only way to feel safe or to feel good or good enough was to do more, be more, have more, learn more, control everything so it went right. Because when it goes right, I was okay. I was safe, or I felt good, accepted, approved, loved, whatever it was, some sort of self-worth element to it, and learnt that as a survival strategy. And so as you went through life, this little one continued to use that as a survival strategy. And this is essentially the subconscious brain. This is just what we've neurologically wired through repetition and consistency to do. And it's so ingrained that it's like the super highway of thinking, right? And so then we've got this adult self, which is the logic and reasoning. So we've learned over the years to rationalize things. It's what you do in hindsight, and it's what you do before you flip your lid and go into subconscious survival mode. And so this is the one that when you've had this incident with your daughter, gets in the car when you've dropped her off and goes, why did you do that? You are so stupid. You should have behaved differently. You shouldn't have yelled like that. You know better than that. You know she feeds off you. You should have stopped it beforehand and just badgers and badgers and badgers this little one. But this little one was just a child when those beliefs happened. And rather than like, and if your child came up to you and said, I don't feel safe unless life is going right, and I'm really worried and I feel really uncomfortable and I feel really unsafe and I don't know what to do when life isn't going to plan, what would you say to that child? Would you go, you stupid thing, you should be thinking differently, you should be feeling differently? Or would you actually wrap your arms around that child and go, you're okay, you're safe, I've got you, we're going to work through this together, and would actually nurture that child's self? And so when we look at it from that perspective and go, you know what, these aspects of ourself that are just struggling or have these belief systems or these identities, they served you, they helped you, they protected you. And it's just that they don't realize, this child doesn't realize that you don't need those protective strategies anymore, that you're okay because you have logic and reasoning. You are an adult now. And this situation doesn't equal that, whatever that was from the childhood to make that get set up in the first place. And so it's treating that part of yourself like it was a child in your mind. And as soon as you have that analogy and you see how young it was, and usually there's an age, do you know, just like as we're talking like this, how old this child might be that set up that perfectionist identity?
Oh, yeah. I think that's been around for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
No, my parents divorced when I was two or three, and then I think I've always learnt like not to have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
To just be good and be quiet and don't take up too much space.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, everything you've just said makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
and I can see that all the rules that I make for myself around that. This whole experience with my daughter is a lesson in softening, and being compassionate and
Mm,
gentle
yeah.
and leaning in rather than putting up armor and walls, and like it's such a massive lesson for all of
Yeah.
us.
And one of the things that happens is when you have grown up in an environment where you've had to depend on yourself and you've learned that, okay, I need to be responsible for the doing more, being more, having more, learning more, controlling more, that no one's going to come and save me, you start to create what's called an avoidant attachment style. So there's different attachment styles, right? And an avoidant, and most of us, to be fair, of our age group are often avoidance because we've been learned to figure it out for yourself. Like, we're not going to solve your problems for you. You need to just figure it out. And, parents in our generation weren't necessarily as invested. And that's not all parents, and that's not to say that even that we were neglected. It was just the style of parenting was just, you come home when the street lights came on. Like, no one was asking where you were. No one was invested in what you were doing, really, in a lot of cases. I know every situation is different, so I'm being very general, but I've worked with enough clients now in, depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol addictions, and parenting to know that a lot of our generation is avoidant. We've learned, don't turn to anybody when you're struggling with something because no one's there for you. And so when you are paired up with, in whatever way, whether it's a relationship like a marital relationship or a partnership of that kind, or a child parent relationship where the other person is needy, it just makes the whole nervous system go, get the hell away from me. And I'm speaking from experience, right? That I learned, I had that avoidant tendency, and it's a spectrum as well. Like, you can be completely avoidant where you just don't have relationships with people. And the thing is with that avoidant attachment is that usually that's the thing that you want the most, is the closeness, is to want to be needy, but you would never allow yourself to be needy. And so when somebody else is needy, they are a trigger for you because all of a sudden they're in your face and you don't have that space and you just want them to just figure it out for themselves. But their relationship or their attachment style, or perhaps just where they're at in their development, let's say someone's got really, really young kids, or they've got needs that need you, like your daughter, it can be very triggering to your nervous system. So it's being aware too that, again, this little one is often running the show. And it's just being able to recognize that, hey, when I'm going into that fight or flight response, this one feels unsafe. This one feels uncomfortable. And it's using both your narrative and also your regulation tools that you've got to really just envisage just bringing that little one in and going, we're okay. We don't have to know the answer to this right now. This doesn't have to be going right. This doesn't have to be meeting my picture. We're okay for things to be different than what we expected. We may not have the answer right now, but we'll figure it out because we've always figured it out. And in fact, that's a strength of this one because this one's already figured it out. It's just that sometimes if it doesn't go right straight away or she doesn't have the strategy right now straight away, she freaks out. And the adult's just got to say, we're okay. Because the reality of life, and this is where that narrative comes in and that changing that story, is life doesn't go in this straight line. That we sometimes get what we want, but sometimes we don't. Because the reality is life does this, highs and lows, ups and downs, wanted, unwanted, goods and bads. And the learning is in finding value or being able to sit in the fire and still be okay. That if we are experiencing the same issue with our child over and over again, like socks of a morning, catching yourself going, we should be over this by now, and going, reality is we're not. So let's deal with it in the moment because the reality is what it is. And the only reason why you get triggered by it is because you think it shouldn't be like that. But the reality is it is like that. So we have to get through this moment and then in hindsight, look back with curiosity and go, why are we still here? What is that actual problem that's preventing, or that barrier that's preventing her from being where I think we should already be at? And you can really use this part of you in a different way because she's very resourceful and she's able to be solution focused. So we're not trying to shut her down. We're just trying to integrate the rational mind into her skill set. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
What resonates with you about that?
Really interesting about that avoidant attachment style. I've never really understood kind of which one I am, but the way you've described that, it just 100% makes sense. And that not like, all of my relationships are sort of transactional. They're conditional. It's like you only like me because I'm a good because I do all these things for you. Like it's not, if I'm really struggling, I'd never expect anyone to be there. Yeah. And so to have this child that has all these needs is exasperating. It's sort of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. This is really hands-on, and I think that is reinforced, like I said, from every angle, from her school, particularly about, the kids, they need to be doing this by themselves and they should be this and they should be that. And she's just not in so many ways. And so having to, just be okay with things being really different has been hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, just noticing that being triggered in myself is massive. It's really, really huge.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because we think that we're here to help our children, but more often than not, they're here to help us. They're here to help us heal. And a lot of the times they're here to help us heal by triggering us, by being who they are. And this may not be the case for you, but it is for a lot of parents, is very often they get the most heightened, and it comes at that narrative and those belief systems and those emotions that you're triggered by come to the surface. Very often the age your child is at is the age you were at when it was very, very prominent in your life that you were struggling? And I don't know, is that the case for you? Like, can you, like when you were 14, were you at kind of a crisis stage in your life
It's
at all?
super interesting. I feel like there was like a disconnection from body and mind. It's
Right,
like, let's just move into the head and start controlling things
right.
because the feelings are too much.
Yeah, at 14?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember being pretty stuck in my head, and
Yeah.
like the plan was, yeah, if you do everything right, everything will stay safe and you'll be okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? You know, that, and I don't know why this is the case, but it just happens that when our children reach that same age, we all, I don't know whether it's because it's history, well, it's not even history repeating itself with your daughter, but it's just that maybe we reflect on what we were like when we were that age, and then it just triggers all of these emotions in us. And if something's hard in you, it sounds like your default response is to want to dissociate and not feel. Like, just find the solution. You even said it before. Just get back to it being okay. Like, I can't remember your exact words, but you just said, I don't know what to do. I just want it to go away. That's what you said. I just want it to go away. And this is where these lenses and upgrades are so valuable in being able to redefine things, is because for those of you who haven't watched the podcast, so this is, you need to go back and watch either 2 and 3, or 2 or 3, sorry, and episode 5, because episode 5 looks at the upgrades. And the upgrades are, there's 4 upgrades for 4 stressful thinking lenses. So when we're in this right versus wrong, and I've already spoken about this before, about the upgrade is life is a story of ups and downs. You're thinking through that perfectionist mindset that it needs to be going like this. But the reality, because remember, stress is a conflict between belief and
It
reality.
needs to be going like that, Jackie. Always better.
Okay, so sorry. Well, the reality is that sometimes it goes like that.
We
We
don't like
crash
that.
and burn.
We
No,
don't like that.
she doesn't like that.
She does not like that. She's
No,
not good with that.
this one realizes that it's reality. Okay, so what we try to do is teach this one that life doesn't go like that, and it's okay. We're okay. And not only is it okay, but sometimes this leads to this. And if you looked back and got her to look back throughout your entire life and you actually mapped it out, which is a tool that I would give people if I was doing one-on-one stuff, and I have before when I've done one-on-ones in retreats, to actually sit there and chart everything that you can think of in your life, every single experience, goods, bads, highs, lows, all of it. And you'll find that a lot of the time your highs came from a low that happened prior.
Yeah.
That, and this comes into the second upgrade, because we're looking at the missing out lens in the second lens, the second stressful thinking lens. And the upgrade is that everything has value. And even through the unwanted is something to learn. There's a hidden good in the bad, or there's an opportunity in it. And this is where you can really rally this one to use this as an opportunity, because she's done that before. Oh, this has happened. We'll pick ourselves back up and we'll do more, be more, have more, learn more, control more. So she's got skills. And it's about getting her to use those without attaching her self-worth to it or her sense of safety to it. And that's where you've got some beautiful mindfulness tools to help really ground her in the present moment and help her to feel and look for evidence of safety, because she won't be looking for evidence of safety when life's not going to plan. She's looking for evidence of what I need to fear and what I need to control. And while that can be helpful, because sometimes there are some things that you can do in that moment, and you will have loads of tools that you've probably collected along the years of how you can help your daughter in those moments. Because I'm sure you are so resourceful about it that you would have studied it to the nth degree. And so you've got some really valuable resources there to use. It's just about training yourself to, one, look for evidence of safety, to change that narrative to say, you know what, this isn't wrong. This is part of the experience. It isn't always like this. It isn't always going to be like this. This will pass, because that's the nature of life, is it's going to have its highs and lows. So this moment of her yelling and screaming like this and me not knowing what to do, that's going to pass. And it's okay that I don't know what I need to do, because I'm not going to know everything. So you're using that narrative to change, but you're also using your mindfulness stuff to feel calmer in the body. And if it helps you, actually imagine your child self. Like when I think of it, like you're saying she's really quite young. So you mentioned sort of, from the age of even 2 or 3 years old. So you imagine how you would help a 3-year-old to feel safe. What would you do? What would you do?
Give her a hug.
Yeah. So it might even be that you imagine hugging that 3-year-old self. Sometimes it can even be helpful to even get a picture of yourself at 3 years old if you've got a photo. And you just imagine looking at that photo, and it can actually be quite confronting. Like I've done this exercise a few times with myself, and I think she was 9 at the time and I had a 9-year-old photo. And I remember looking at it and I was just so like touched, and like I'm not even thinking about it, I'm emotional at just how innocent that young child is. And when you look at yourself that way and go, how could she have known any different? Like where was the person saying to her, you're okay, you are safe, it's going to be okay, this is just part of highs and lows in life, you're going to make it, we'll find the solution, we'll be okay. You need to be that for yourself. And so otherwise what you're doing to yourself, if you don't do it this way, is you're going, you're an idiot, you shouldn't have done that, you're a bad person for yelling at your child, as opposed to you just felt unsafe in that situation. Let's look at it differently. What could I have thought differently next time? How could I have seen that situation differently next, like if it happened again? What could I do to feel more safe in that situation? And if you envisaged that you were doing that, you were teaching a 2 or 3-year-old, or you were helping a 2 or 3-year-old to feel regulated and safe, and you imagine that in your mind, you'll feel a lot more compassion. And from a neurological perspective, you are starting to integrate the left and right parts of the brain. You're integrating your sense of self and your memories with the logical. And at the same time, when you're using your meditation and your mindfulness stuff, you're integrating the top and the bottom, the mind and the body, and you're retraining the body into a new state of being when life doesn't go to plan. Because you don't need to apply this when life's going to plan, because you're going to feel great. And she's going to feel amazing because she's going to feel like she's nailed it. So it's not about trying to dismiss that younger version of yourself. It's not about trying to shut her down. And it's not about you still want to celebrate your wins, and you'll feel great when you celebrate your wins, or when you have a win and your life's going to plan. But when life isn't going to plan, that's when you're going to have to notice how you're feeling, and then go to the thought side of things. What must I be thinking to be feeling this way? Looking at those lenses and then upgrading them, and realizing it's just part of the journey. It's just part of your day that you've had this interaction, right? It's where she's at in her development. It's just part of, those teenage years, for starters, are full of chaotic stuff going on in their brain, because they're completely rewiring for adulthood. Hormones are everywhere. And all of that logic and reasoning you fought so hard to install in their brains it's not gone out the window, but because it's rewiring, often the part of the brain that's responding to life is impulse and emotion, and sometimes even aggression. And so she's not wanting that. Like the teenager that you have now is not the adult they'll become. And so that's helpful to know. And I know now, having like an 18 and a 20-year-old, that I said that so many times to myself as they were growing up. This is not the human they're going to become. And it's only now that they're older that I'm starting to go, actually, you guys are good humans.
Yay.
So you often won't see the fruits of your labor until down the track. And then you can tick the box and go, oh, I actually did a pretty good job. Because I have no doubt that she is nailing it. But your standards, like you said, always have to be this.
Mm.
And the reality is you're going to do this and then this and then this and then this. But there's value in it all. You're always learning something. There's always opportunity. There's always a hidden good and the bad. Or if you don't have a solution or something to feel good about this moment, there's always something else going on in your life that you can look at to feel good about and to feel grateful about. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So does that help you in terms of kind of how you are responding emotionally or how you're feeling about yourself when you're dealing with these challenges?
Yeah, it does. It's really interesting because like you said, I try to work with my sort of somatic sensations in my body. Like I can tell that I'm getting, anxious or tense or annoyed. But what I haven't been thinking about is the thoughts or the beliefs about what's driving that.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful to start to bring those into the light and
Yeah.
understand that they're still very much driving a lot of the program.
Yeah.
And though you mentioned the word curiosity before, and so I'm trying to do that more and just being curious about what's happening rather than I don't like this feeling, it's got to go away.
Yep.
Because that's my default. It's like
Yep.
I don't want this feeling. Let me drink a glass of wine and it'll go away.
Yeah, because that can be a slippery slope, right? Like it's harmless to begin with, but it can also, for some people, I'm not saying that's you, but I can say that for some people that is that very slippery slope because that's just another way to dissociate from your
100%.
your
Yeah.
body, from your feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed that pattern in myself. Like, how can I shut this down straight away? So I'm trying to just be curious about everything that's showing up, but the thinking hasn't been part of that. So that's been really
Yeah.
good and
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
And I think if you can sit down with her and actually go, let's look at this and just kind of feel into use your somatic because you to feel into if I was sitting down with that 3-year-old and she had a voice, why is she scared in this moment? What's her reference point of that? And you'll probably get the answer. You ask your brain questions, it has to go looking for the answer. And if you allow yourself, and I know as I'm saying this, like you have a trained ability to be able to do this. And some people can naturally do this. But for some people, feeling emotions is so intense, they may need to work with a therapist to do this. So that's my disclaimer here, that not everyone's going to be able to sit with their emotions and actually ask their body, or their 3-year-old selves or whatever your child self is, what's going on here? What are you feeling? What are you fearful of about this moment? What are you scared is going to happen if this isn't right or if this is different to your expectation? And where's your evidence of that? Sorry?
Well, just wanted to say, and that's the only reason I can do it is because of 20 years of working with a therapist who taught me how. So it's taken a really long time.
And look, I think it's also too relevant to the level of trauma that someone has experienced. I mean, if you don't have 20 years of meditation experience, if you have had severe trauma and dissociation was your coping mechanism, you'll need to learn how to trust yourself to be able to regulate your emotions in order to look at them. Yeah. So for some people, that dissociation is so strong, I would never recommend somebody do it by themselves. So there's obviously a spectrum, that if you're fearful, like if you're listening to this and you are fearful of feeling your emotions, don't do it by yourself. But for a lot of people who haven't gone through severe trauma experiences or have the training in meditation or mindfulness, they are able to actually just sit with themselves and challenge or get curious about their emotions and ask themselves, where's your reference point of this fear? Where did you learn that life not going to plan is something to be scared of? And what is it that you're scared of? Are you scared that I'm going to be unsafe, or are you scared that I'm going to be worth less or rejected or left by myself? Because often that's why we created the avoidant personality, is because we couldn't trust anybody else, but we wanted to. And so it can sometimes, it can be very complex what's going on in someone's, psyche. But with self-awareness and if, for example, I am like you are somebody who has had extreme trauma and you aren't able to feel your emotions, I would, at the very least, while you are seeking out the right professional to work through all that with you, I would, at the very least, just start the most basic mindfulness strategies or meditation. And I use that loosely because sometimes meditation is about going within, and that doesn't feel safe for some people either. So if you can do it, great. If you don't beat yourself up. Just do something else. There's lots of ways to meditate. And at the end of the day, meditation is about regulating your nervous system and training it to feel calm and peaceful. You could do that doing a puzzle. You could do that listening to music. You could do that walking in the park. That might be your way of stepping out of the stress and training your body to feel safe and to feel okay in this present moment. And that's essentially what mindfulness and meditation, is, right? Like, would you want to add to that from your, professional experience of mindfulness and meditation for someone who's experienced trauma and can't perhaps look at themselves?
100%. Yeah. And I think for the first 10 years that I was meditating, I was still in my own head. It was
Yeah.
just a cognitive exercise. And it was finding a therapist who could help me to feel safe in my own body, which took a long time, which, is slowly building up that safety. But yeah, just to your point about, it's not about sitting down with your eyes closed and breathing in and out. It can be about, going and just noticing the wind on your face, or the smell of the air, or the light in the trees, like those moments of connecting to your senses, and will regulate your nervous system. So
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
kind of micro moments have been helpful for me too.
Yeah, because once you start to, feel okay about paying attention to how something feels, like the wind on your face, how that feels, or how it feels to hear something, or how it feels to taste something, you're already starting to connect with your body. So you're already starting to orient to the habit of being safe to feel. And so if you're doing that for a while, and I explain this, and I'm going into this because a lot of people think that if they can't do what I just said in terms of sitting with themselves and going, what am I feeling and why am I feeling this? If they can't do that, or if they can't do meditation, then they're never going to make any progress. But I want listeners to know that if you are using any of the senses, that is you orienting yourself back to feeling. And it can be the scaffolding you need to be able to then feel emotions, because it's just another sensation that you're feeling, but you've learned it's okay to feel, what I'm feeling on my face. It's okay to even just feel touch, and it's just another step to feel an emotion when you have the resources to know what to do with that emotion. So none of what we're saying is necessarily easy for everybody. But parenting, I think in general, just to kind of bring this back to our conversation, like I said at the beginning, changes us physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, and ethically, right? And I think even though it can be really tough when these emotions come up, it's just part of our learning. It's part of our growth. We don't have to get it all right. There's beauty in the unknown, and there is growth in the challenges that we face. And I just challenge you to look back on your life and look at the challenges that you've had so far and how you've grown from it, so that looking at this moment right now, you'll be able to see evidence that, yeah, one, I'm going to be okay because I've always been okay through adversity. And secondly, this challenging situation is actually going to help me to learn more about myself and grow and do different things in my life and lead to other experiences. So it's not wrong. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. It's a helpful perspective. Thank
Yeah.
you.
But in the meantime, just keep talking to this little one because she needs your love. She needs to learn not just how to let you in as the adult, but the more you integrate your adult self with your child self, the more you'll actually learn to let other people in too. So that's going to change how you feel about your daughter needing you so much. And it's probably going to change how you relate to your partner as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us, Amanda. I really appreciate you opening up with your story and your belief systems. I know how many parents are just going to resonate with this podcast, knowing that they feel the same, because I know from doing this for nearly 20 years, we are all the same. We all think the same. We all have those lenses. We all have that personal growth. Your personal development's never done, so you're never going to get it right. And, it's just that our stories are different. Our packaging is different. And sometimes the experiences that we have and the intensity of those in that moment are different from somebody else's intensities. So please know that you are contributing so much to so many people who are listening to this. And I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Have a great day. Come and join in the conversation by following Beneath Behaviour on socials for daily tips, insights, and support. See you there.